When I attended Sill's wedding, my name tag said, Housekeeper. Mills smirked. You're just a servant here. Worse, I had no meal. Sill giggled. Food ice for real family. I stood up, took off my ring and said, then I'm leaving. Mill turned pale. Wait. In a hospital room where the morning sun streamed through the window, Olivia Wilson was checking a patient's vital signs. Olivia worked as a nurse at Northwest Regional Hospital and had earned the trust of her patients through her dedicated work. Her smartphone rang, displaying a message from her husband Robert. Don't forget dinner at Mom's tonight. It's the final meeting for Vanessa's wedding. Olivia sighed. Since marrying Robert Wilson 5 years ago, her relationship with her mother-in-law Carol had not been easy. Carol Wilson came from a distinguished family in the Boston suburbs. For her, her son's marriage to a nurse from a middle-class family had been a disappointing development. Since the COVID pandemic, Olivia's workload had doubled, but Carol and Robert's sister Vanessa often belittled Olivia's job as just a nurse. Additionally, not having children was another source of disappointment for Carol. She frequently slipped the phrase responsibility to continue the family line into their conversations. When they arrived at Carol's mansion in Bridgewater's quiet residential area, Vanessa's luxury car was already in the parking lot. In the reception room, Carol and Vanessa were sitting on the sofa, discussing something earnestly. Finally, you're here, Carol said with a cold smile. Where's Robert? He said work will run a bit longer. Shall we start without him? Vanessa was preparing for her wedding to Michael Stanford in a month. Michael was an executive at a real estate development company, and for Carol, this marriage was an excellent opportunity to elevate her social status. We were going over the final guest list for the wedding, Vanessa said, elegantly brushing back her hair. You and Robert will be at the family table, of course. Let me know if there's anything I can help with. Olivia offered. Thank you, but we're fine, Vanessa quickly replied. The planner is handling everything. You just need to show up. The conversation shifted to wedding details, with Olivia simply listening, her opinion never sought. The living room walls were covered with Wilson family photos, but Olivia and Robert's wedding picture was small and pushed to the side. Robert arrived, kissed Olivia, and sat beside her. As dinner time approached, the conversation turned to the Stanford family's reputation and wealth. By the way, Carol suddenly turned to Olivia. Could I get a little more support this month? There are some additional expenses for Vanessa's wedding. Olivia and Robert provided monthly financial support to Carol. Since Robert's father had passed away, this support was essential to maintain Carol's luxurious lifestyle. As they were preparing to leave, Martha, the housekeeper, quietly approached Olivia. Mrs. Wilson, about tomorrow's wedding rehearsal, what time will the help arrive? Olivia was confused. The help? I'm a guest, Martha. Martha looked down embarrassed. I'm sorry, Madame said. Once in the car, Olivia felt the mental fatigue of always being treated as an outsider. What kind of treatment would she receive at Vanessa's upcoming wedding? Based on past experiences, she had no expectations. Still, for Robert's sake, she needed to remain strong and dignified. On the day of Vanessa's wedding, a clear blue sky enveloped the luxury hotel, the Windsor in the Boston suburbs. Olivia, nervous since morning, was calming herself with Robert's encouragement. Today is Vanessa's special day. Let's celebrate with them, Olivia told herself as she arranged her hair in front of the mirror. She had chosen a simple yet elegant navy blue dress, careful to avoid criticism from Robert's mother Carol. You look lovely. Robert placed his hands on her shoulders and smiled at her in the mirror. Let's go. Mother will make a fuss if we're late. When they arrived at the hotel, the parking lot was already filled with luxury cars. While Robert was parking the car, Olivia took a deep breath to prepare herself. She knew her relationship with her in-laws was complicated, but she hoped for a peaceful day today. Passing through the luxurious lobby, they headed to the wedding reception. At the reception desk, decorated with flowers and white ribbons, several staff members were greeting guests with smiles. Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, Robert announced. And the receptionist checked the list and took out 2 name tags. Mr. Robert, Miss Olivia. Here are your name tags for today. Please wear them on the left side of your chest. When Olivia took her name tag and casually glanced at it, her smile froze. The tag clearly read Olivia Wilson, housekeeper. For a moment she couldn't believe her eyes. This is Olivia's voice trembled. Robert was still checking his own name tag, which only read Robert Wilson, son of Carol Wilson. Is something wrong? A cold voice came from behind. Turning around, they saw Carol wearing a sophisticated light purple dress with a satisfied smile. "Carol, there seems to be a mistake with this name tag," Olivia said, trying to maintain her composure. Carol glanced at the tag and feigned surprise. "Oh, is there a problem? You're just a servant for this family, aren't you?" Those words pierced Olivia's heart like a sharp knife. Surrounding guests turned curious and contemptuous gazes toward her. Olivia's cheeks flushed, and tears welled in her eyes, but she desperately tried not to show them. "What are you saying?" Robert finally realized the situation and grabbed his mother's arm. "I'll get this corrected immediately." "No, Robert," Olivia said quietly. "Today is Vanessa's day. Let's not make a scene." She took the name tag and slipped it into her chest pocket, a silent act of resistance. Robert's face was red with anger, but he remained silent when Olivia squeezed his hand tightly. "A wise decision," Carol said in a low voice. "Now, let's go to the ceremony hall. Michael's parents are waiting." Carol gracefully walked away, leaving Olivia and Robert behind. "Unbelievable," Robert gritted his teeth. "I'll talk to Mother right away." "Not now," Olivia took his arm. "Today isn't a day for conflict. Let's talk about it later." The ceremony was beautifully conducted. Vanessa, dressed in a white lace gown, was radiant. Michael's face showed pure love. However, Olivia's heart was heavy. She felt Carol's cold gaze following her throughout the ceremony. After the ceremony, guests moved to the hotel's luxurious ballroom for the reception. Round tables were beautifully arranged, with guest names displayed at each table. Olivia and Robert were guided to the family table and took their seats. "Are you okay?" Robert quietly asked Olivia. "Yes," she smiled weakly. "I'll try not to mind it." The table also seated Carol, Michael's parents James and Eleanor Stanford, and a few other close relatives. The newlyweds sat at a separate table, and the congratulatory speeches began. After the speeches, waiters started bringing in the food. As luxurious appetizers were placed at each seat, Olivia noticed something strange. Nothing was placed at her seat alone. "Excuse me." Olivia stopped a passing waiter. "My food." The waiter gave an apologetic look. "I'm sorry. These are my instructions." Robert was about to stand up angrily, but just then he was called by his sister Vanessa and headed to the groom's table. Olivia was left alone, trembling with embarrassment and anger. "You look troubled." Vanessa suddenly appeared next to Olivia. There was a malicious smile on her face. "Why are you doing this?" Olivia asked in a low voice. Vanessa giggled and leaned in to whisper, "Meals are only for real family. People like you aren't included." That was the last straw. All the humiliation, petty harassment, and cold stares seemed to culminate in this moment. Olivia slowly stood up and placed her napkin on the table. The room grew quiet, and many eyes turned to her. "If that's how you feel, then I shouldn't be here." Her voice was small but resolute. Across the table, Carol was about to say something, but Olivia no longer had ears to listen. She slowly removed her wedding ring from her left ring finger and placed it on the table. The silver band made a small sound as it touched the marble tabletop. "If I'm not a real family, then I'll leave." The room fell silent as if water had been thrown. She could see Robert hurrying back from Vanessa's table, but Olivia had already started walking toward the exit. "Olivia!" Robert's voice called after her. "Wait." Carol's voice had a desperation never heard before. "It's a joke, just a joke. Come back." But Olivia's feet didn't stop. She straightened her back, held her head high, and walked out of the venue with dignity. Just before leaving through the door, she turned back for a moment. Carol's face had drained of color, turning pale. Vanessa was left speechless, her mouth open. And on the faces of Michael's parents, especially Eleanor Stanford, there was clear anger. Olivia passed through the hotel lobby and took a deep breath of fresh air outside. Her heart was wounded, but she also felt a strange sense of liberation. She had finally freed herself from the anger and humiliation she had endured for so long. Just as she was about to call a taxi, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning around, she saw Michael's mother Eleanor hurrying toward her. "Wait!" Eleanor gently grabbed her arm. "What just happened is unforgivable. Carol and Vanessa's behavior. I'm at a loss for words." Olivia smiled while holding back tears. "Thank you, Eleanor. But I'm going home. I can't stay any longer." "I understand," Eleanor nodded. "But know that you acted with strength and dignity." At those words, Olivia could genuinely smile for the first time. She hailed a taxi and headed home. After Olivia left, tension hung over the wedding venue. Robert returned from his sister's table and finding his wife's wedding ring, his expression changed. What happened? Where's Olivia? He asked urgently. Carol tried to hide her distress with a forced smile. Just a little misunderstanding, Robert. She'll be back soon. However, Michael's mother Eleanor intervened with a cold voice. It's not a misunderstanding. I saw everything that you and Vanessa did to Olivia. Robert's eyes darkened with anger. He picked up his wife's name tag from the table and read it. At that moment, his expression changed from anger to fury. What have you done? His voice had lost its usual calmness. Where is Olivia's meal? Why was she the only one not served? Michael was standing beside Vanessa. He too was beginning to understand the situation. What's going on, Vanessa? Vanessa blushed and began to make excuses. It was just a joke, Michael. She took it too seriously. A joke? Michael's voice was incredulous. Calling someone a housekeeper and not giving them food is a joke? Around the venue, guests began whispering among themselves. It was only a matter of time before rumors spread. Michael's father quietly stood up and looked at Carol with a stern expression. This is unacceptable behavior. His voice was low but full of authority. We are a family that values family bonds and respect. We cannot be associated with a family that treats people so inhumanely. Eleanor stood beside her husband and nodded in agreement. Our blessing for your marriage is temporarily suspended. We cannot continue the ceremony under these circumstances. The color drained from Vanessa's face. But it's my special day. Michael took his fiancée's hand but said with a stern expression, Vanessa, if this is your true nature, we need to seriously reconsider our marriage. Robert was no longer listening. He gripped the name tag and saying only I'm going to find Olivia, left the venue. Outside, hotel staff were calling a taxi for Olivia. Robert ran to the parking lot and jumped into his car. He gripped the steering wheel desperately and hurried home, apologizing repeatedly in his mind. When Olivia arrived home, she paused at the entrance. This house was a symbol of her love with Robert, but now her heart was filled with doubt. She unlocked the door, entered the empty house, sat on the sofa, and quietly cried. 20 minutes later, she heard the front door open. Robert came in, out of breath. Olivia. His voice calling her name was mixed with deep sadness and concern. Olivia looked up, and tears flowed at the sight of her husband. Robert sat next to her and held her tightly. Mother and Vanessa's actions are unforgivable, he said quietly. You are the most important person in my life. I'm sorry for their behavior. Olivia felt small in her husband's arms. Why am I always an outsider, even after 5 years together? You're not an outsider. Robert cradled her face in his hands. You are my family, my everything. Mother and Vanessa's values are not mine. They held each other for a long time. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting twilight into the room. Finally, Olivia quietly asked, What do we do now? Robert answered with a determined expression. First, I'm immediately cutting off financial support to Mother. I have no obligation to support her luxurious lifestyle anymore. Olivia looked at her husband in surprise. Really? But Carol. Mother should face the consequences of her actions, Robert said firmly. Besides, she still has sufficient assets. She just won't be able to maintain that mansion and social life. Olivia nodded slowly. Her wounded heart still hurt, but her husband's determination gave her strength. What about our relationship with them? She asked cautiously. I think we should keep our distance for a while. Robert held her hand. Until Mother and Vanessa truly reflect and apologize. They sat quietly, discussing their plans for the future. Amidst the sadness and anger, new determination was beginning to sprout. And Robert said somewhat shyly, How about a weekend getaway, just the two of us? I know a nice cottage along the Maine coast. A smile returned to Olivia's face. That sounds wonderful. We need time for ourselves. That night, their phones kept ringing. There were calls from Carol, Vanessa, and even Michael, but they didn't respond. They needed time for themselves. The next morning, Robert called the bank to stop automatic transfers to his mother's account. Olivia contacted her workplace to take a few days off. Her supervisor showed understanding, saying, You've always been there for others. You should take time for yourself too. Desperate messages continued from Carol, but Robert calmly sent only a brief text. We need some time. Your and Vanessa's actions were unacceptable. Olivia is my wife and my family. If you can't accept that, We need to reconsider our relationship." While packing their bags, Olivia looked out the window. The morning sunlight illuminated the flowers in the garden, announcing the start of a new day. Yesterday's humiliation and sadness still lingered in her heart, but she also felt a strange sense of liberation. "I'm ready." Robert placed his hand on her shoulder. Olivia turned around with a smile. "Yes, let's go." As they were leaving the house, they took a letter from the mailbox. It was from Michael. Olivia opened it in the car, and they read it together. "I sincerely apologize for yesterday's events. I was shocked by the behavior of Vanessa's family. Our wedding is currently on hold. My parents have decided that we cannot continue the ceremony under these circumstances. I've told Vanessa she needs to seriously reconsider. Olivia, I respect your dignified action. Safe travels. Michael Stanford." They finished reading the letter in silence. Robert started the car and headed for the Maine coast. A week passed. Olivia and Robert spent quiet time by the sea, healing their emotional wounds. As they were having a leisurely breakfast at their small cottage in Maine, Robert's smartphone rang again. Looking at the screen, he saw it was his mother calling. Robert hesitated for a moment but decided not to answer and ended the call. "Carol?" Olivia asked, gazing at the calm sea outside the window. "Yes." Robert took a sip of coffee. "That's the 10th call since yesterday. I've received several messages from Vanessa too." Olivia showed him her smartphone. The screen displayed unread messages from Vanessa. "Olivia, please contact me. I'm truly sorry." They continued eating breakfast in silence. The seaside breeze entered the room through the window, swaying the lace curtains. "They might need more time," Robert said quietly, "whether they're truly remorseful or just want to restore the situation." Olivia took her husband's hand. "I respect your decision, but we can't keep rejecting them forever." "I know," Robert sighed deeply. "It's just that when I think about that day, on the final day of their vacation, they were preparing to return home." When Robert came back from returning the keys to the cottage owner, he had a slightly puzzled expression. "What's wrong?" Olivia asked. The owner said there's an interesting article in the local newspaper. He opened the newspaper he was holding. The Stanford family has announced a charitable initiative. They're establishing a fund to support healthcare workers. Olivia took the newspaper in surprise. The article stated that Michael Stanford's parents had announced the establishment of a fund to support healthcare workers who had worked dedicatedly during the pandemic. In an interview, Eleanor Stanford said, "We want to build a society that respects true heroes and appreciates their contributions." "Is this about me?" Olivia whispered. Robert placed his hand on her shoulder. "I can't be sure, but considering the timing." They quietly loaded their luggage into the car and headed home. When they arrived, there were several letters in the mailbox. Among them were Michael's official notice of postponing the wedding and a private apology letter from the Stanford family to Olivia. 3 weeks after returning to their daily lives, Olivia had resumed her duties at the hospital. Her colleagues noticed a subtle change in her. She had a more resolute attitude and increased confidence in herself. One weekday evening, as Olivia finished her shift at the hospital and headed to the parking lot, she saw a familiar car parked there. Carol Wilson was waiting in front of the car. She didn't have her usual glamour, was dressed simply, and looked obviously tired. "Olivia." Carol's voice trembled. "Could we talk for a moment?" Olivia stopped and looked at her mother-in-law. The formerly arrogant figure was gone. Carol now looked small and fragile. "Go ahead," Olivia quietly agreed. They entered a cafe near the hospital. Carol ordered coffee but barely touched it. "My actions were unforgivable," Carol said with tears in her eyes. "I was blinded by pride and prejudice. I didn't try to see who you are, how valuable you are." Olivia listened silently, trying to discern whether there was truth in Carol's words. "Have you heard from the Stanford family?" Carol asked. "Yes, from Michael and his parents." Carol smiled bitterly. "They've completely cut ties with us. Michael told Vanessa he would reconsider if she could truly change. But what about Vanessa?" "She's reflecting too," Carol answered with a tired expression. "For the first time, she's beginning to think about how her actions affect others." Silence spread between them. Outside the cafe window, people were busy coming and going. "I'm going to sell the mansion," Carol suddenly confessed. "Without Robert's support, I can't maintain that lifestyle. I'm planning to move to a small apartment." Olivia was surprised by Carol's change. She had once been someone who would do anything for social status. Now she was accepting a simpler life. "Carol, Olivia carefully chose her words. I might be able to forgive you, but it will take time to rebuild trust. Carol nodded. I understand that. I just ask for a chance from Robert and you. I want to change. That night, Olivia told Robert about her conversation with Carol. He listened thoughtfully and eventually nodded. Let's meet with Mother, he decided, but I'll let her know that our relationship won't return to what it was before. The following weekend, Olivia and Robert visited Carol's new apartment. Compared to her previous luxurious mansion, it was incredibly modest. Carol welcomed them warmly and had prepared a homemade lunch. You cooked yourself? Robert asked in surprise. He had never seen his mother in the kitchen. Yes, Carol answered, a little embarrassed. I'm learning to cook from YouTube. I'm not good, but I'm practicing. The conversation was awkward at first, but gradually became more natural. Carol talked about her experiences over the past few weeks and acknowledged how distorted her values had been. I've always judged people by wealth and status, she confessed honestly, but now I see how empty that was. Olivia observed her mother-in-law's change. It didn't seem superficial, something fundamental seemed to be changing. What about Vanessa? Robert asked. She's struggling too, Carol answered. Michael has given her time, but she seems to understand that she herself must truly change. Before leaving, Carol handed Olivia a small box. Open it, she said quietly. When Olivia opened the box, inside was a beautiful silver bracelet. It was engraved with the words "Family is bound by love, not blood." I still have a lot to learn, Carol said, but I want to truly acknowledge that you are my family, Olivia. From that day on, the relationship gradually improved. Robert partially resumed financial support to Carol, but it was limited to the bare necessities, not the unconditional aid of before. Carol accepted this and tried to adapt to a simpler life. A month later, Vanessa came to meet Olivia directly for the first time. Her former arrogance was gone, and she apologized sincerely. I will regret that day for the rest of my life, Vanessa said. I've realized my own shallowness. I don't ask for forgiveness, I just want to change. Olivia smiled gently. People can change, Vanessa. Both you and I. As autumn deepened, all family members agreed to receive counseling and work on building healthy relationships. The first session was tense, but it was a necessary process. One evening, Olivia and Robert were sitting on their porch watching the sunset. The wind rustled the trees, and golden leaves fell dancing. I never imagined, Olivia said, resting her head on Robert's shoulder, that such a humiliating day would bring about such change. Robert embraced his wife. It's because you stood up strongly. Your courage changed everything. They silently watched the sunset. The future was uncertain, but on this day, they had taken a definite step forward. One Sunday, a year later, a small barbecue party was held in Olivia and Robert's backyard. Olivia, putting the final decorations on the garden table, placed her hand on her slightly swollen belly. 6 months pregnant, she and Robert were eagerly awaiting their first child. Don't carry heavy things? Carol worriedly called out, taking the fruit platter from her hands. Leave it to me. Carol had changed remarkably over the past year. She had grown accustomed to living in a modest apartment and volunteered 2 days a week at Olivia's hospital. She listened to patients and for the first time spent time for people other than herself. Thank you, Carol, Olivia smiled. Their relationship wasn't completely healed, but a new relationship based on mutual respect was being built. Vanessa and Michael had married in a small ceremony 6 months earlier. Unlike the previous time when she sought grandeur, this was a heartfelt ceremony with only close friends and family. Vanessa had let go of her sense of superiority and pride, approaching her relationship with Michael with a more humble attitude. How's the baby? Vanessa sat next to Olivia and gently asked. Very lively. Especially likes to kick in the middle of the night, Olivia laughed. Robert, grilling steaks, watched this scene with satisfaction. The sight of his mother and sister genuinely conversing with his wife was once unimaginable. How about a toast to healthy family relationships? Michael suggested, raising his glass. Everyone raised their glasses and said in unison, to healthy family relationships. Olivia's glass was filled with non-alcoholic sparkling cider. After the meal, Carol handed Olivia a small gift. It was a hand-knitted baby blanket. I knitted it myself, Carol said, a little embarrassed. It's not well done, but I put my heart into it. Olivia was touched and hugged her mother-in-law. It's beautiful, thank you. As the day began to fade, the soft light of dusk enveloped the garden. Robert sat next to his wife and put his arm around her shoulders. Looking back, that wedding was a turning point for all of us, Olivia said quietly. Robert nodded. Sometimes painful events bring about the greatest growth. Carol heard that conversation from across the table. She smiled softly, preparing to welcome her first grandchild, holding in her heart the lessons learned from past mistakes. I finally understood what real family means, Carol said quietly. It's not bound by blood, but by mutual respect and love. As the first stars began to shine in the night sky, they talked and laughed together. Olivia had overcome her painful past and found stronger confidence and self-worth. And the whole family had grown from that painful experience. A new chapter was about to open before them. It might not be a perfect story, but it was a more beautiful one, based on truth and dignity.